So I've been painting Warhammer models for about 2 years now, which is a long time. Pretty sure that's like basically a decade. But I've never actually played the game. This is largely due to the fact that I got into the hobby for the painting, and so I usually only paint single models, not really squads or teams.
For my birthday this year, my friend Gabe, check out his YouTube, got me a box of Admech's Guitari. The Adeptus Mechanicus is by far my favorite faction in 40k, and if I were ever to start an army, it would be Admech. Or maybe Death Guard.
But we're doing Admech today, so let's get to it. So of course I started by building and priming them. I skipped filming that part because it's boring and no one cares. But actually it wasn't all boring. When I primed the models, it was really hot and dry in my garage. So the primer dried almost instantly mid-air while I was spraying. This led to a horrible texture that made all my models look like they were covered in sand.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating. And it gets everywhere.
Not too hard of a fix though. I left them in some isopropyl alcohol overnight, then scrubbed off what I could with a toothbrush.
Michael, don't leave me here. Michael!
Now we're almost on to the painting, but before we do that, we need a color scheme.
Now I can't just be boring and paint them red.
How's my army supposed to stand out? So I did some research on how other Admech players figure out color schemes for their armies.
I found out that a lot of people who do custom Admech schemes also create their own forge world that their army comes from.
If you didn't know, a forge world is an entire planet dedicated to massive factories, and it's where the Admech live.
So I eventually decided that I wanted to have brown leather cloaks and bluish green armor, and that my forge world would be responsible for producing uniforms and other clothing for the Imperium, as well as the armor for things like tanks and dreadnoughts. I feel like it's sometimes been overlooked just the sheer amount of infantry uniforms and armor that would have to be constantly produced for the Astra Militarum.
It's gotta come from somewhere.
So I started with a test model because I wasn't entirely sure how to approach painting the armor. In my opinion, if you're even a little bit unsure about how to execute a paint job, it's always a good idea to paint a test model before painting the whole squad. This allows you to figure out what works and what doesn't, develop confidence, and have a clear plan for the execution of the rest of your models. I got the colors and the process figured out pretty quickly, so I moved on to a more assembly line approach to the rest of the painting.
The only one I didn't paint was the sniper.
I figure he'd be a bit more hidden and in the shadows, so I want to paint his cloak and armor with darker colors.
We'll come back to him towards the end. For now, I want to talk about Warhammer, what got me into it, and how I'm finally getting started in the game. I've been a traditional and digital artist for a long time now. Go follow my art Instagram. But I never really knew what miniature painting was.
I first really found out about and became interested in mini painting and Warhammer about 2 years ago when an art YouTuber that I watch, JAZZA, posted a video talking about his history with Warhammer and miniature painting. This came with the announcement that he'd be relaunching his old channel, Tabletop Time, which was a channel based around miniatures and war games. And in this video, he showed off some amazing miniature painters and creators, and I was immediately hooked.
So I started watching a bunch of miniature painting videos, as well as following a bunch of painters on Instagram. Go follow my mini painting Instagram. About a month later, I got my first box of Warhammer miniatures, some Chaos Space Marines. I was so excited to start painting, and I got right into it. This was the first mini I painted, and despite all the videos and tutorials that I had watched in preparation, he turned out kinda meh. But that was totally fine, because I had a blast painting him, and I had 4 more miniatures to practice on. My second mini was a lot more planned out, and a lot more ambitious too. I wanted to paint the armor to look like it was made from emerald, and I had the lofty goal of non-metallic metal gold for all the trim. All in all, this one turned out pretty good, and I even tried my hand at some terrain. All this to say that in the beginning, I was in the hobby for the painting, not the game, or even really the lore. But eventually, I became more interested in that stuff. It probably started when I watched a video by Bricky explaining the lore and gameplay of every 40k faction. After that, I started doing a little bit of research on different factions, their lore, and their gameplay. I started thinking about one day starting my own army. And pretty quickly, one faction stood way above the rest for me. The Adeptus Mechanicus. Upon learning more about them, I was instantly captivated by their insane religiousness and their culty dark age appearance. I loved the idea of being so devoted to something that you'd completely mutilate and tear apart your own body in an attempt to reach a higher ascension. They were so cool, and that's not even mentioning Call. So, with this newfound interest in the game, I started trying to get my friends into it as well. I needed someone to play Warhammer with. Warhammer is expensive and kind of difficult to approach because of the complexity of the lore and the gameplay and the fact that you have to build and paint your own models. So for a while, my friends weren't that into it. It's alright though. As I mentioned in a previous video, a new game store has recently opened up in my area and they have Warhammer nights, so I can just go there, meet some new people. But wait. Now, a year and a half later, I explained a bunch of Warhammer lore to Gabe during a car drive, and later he looked more into it and he found a character that he really liked, Trazyn the Infinite, and now he's hooked. So finally, perfectly timed, about halfway through the making of this video, I finally have a friend to play Warhammer with, and now we're getting a bunch of our other friends into it as well. So if you're getting into Warhammer, try and get your friends into it. It'll be a ton more fun to collect, build, paint, and play if you've got someone to share the experience with. But if none of your friends want to play with you, go to your local game store. See if they've got any Warhammer events going on. Our local game store has Warhammer nights every Monday and mini painting every Thursday night. Gabe and I have attended a few of these events and we've already met some wonderful people, so get out there. Now we're getting to the end of the painting process and I'm coming back to that sniper.
I started by painting the cloak black, using the same method as I did for the brown cloaks. I used 3 different colors, each getting a little bit lighter. I still painted the pack and the wires green, just darker this time, and with only 1 highlight instead of 2. Then I painted the details, like the gun trim and the purity seals. Next, it was time to base. I went pretty basic with these guys, just putting some Mod Podge on the base, sprinkling them with dirt, and then painting that dirt gray. I wet blended together 2 different shades of gray to give the ground a little bit of variety. Then I sprinkled on some grass, and finally I added some tufts. I finished it off by giving the sniper a little bush to hide behind. And then I painted the candles and the cups, and that's it. Just a quick painting of the base room and then they're done. I decided to go with maroon because I think it complements the bluish green pretty well, and I really like it. It's a little more unique than just a basic black base room.
And now, with the squad painted, they're ready for the battlefield. Thank you so much for watching. I've got some Castellans on the way for the next video, and I'm thinking I might do some conversions, so subscribe if you don't want to miss that. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed hearing about my journey, and I hope you're excited to start yours. See you next time.